Oh, no, 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 not you again. All right, folks, Doctor Who time. So, let's talk about some great villains, some great one-time villains who should never be brought back. And I'm sticking this with modern era. I'm not incorporating classic into this list. As I get more caught up on classic, maybe I'll do a classic version of this in the future for, villains to not ever bring back. But I mean, I think there's a lot more options there for that. In any case, this list is going to be about villains who were not recurring villains, appeared in only one story, and reminder, for me, two-parters count as one story, and I don't think they should ever be brought back for various reasons, and I will explain them as I go. Now, even though I am going to be doing a countdown, I've got 5 of these, they're not actually in any order. I'm not building to a number 1 because I couldn't think of a criteria to rank these, so I'm just going to go through them. So I'll be counting them down, but it's not in any kind of actual order. So, number 5, the Flood. Now, I know I'm going to get pushback on a fair amount of these from people, because I know from comments that people have been like, oh, they should bring back this and this. This is one of them. The Flood was the name given to the water infection in waters of Mars. And there's a number of reasons why I don't want to see the Flood brought back. Part of it is, and I do have to cop to this, I think the Flood's a little overrated because it's basically a zombie analog with infected water instead of infected blood. So I'm not as enamored with the Flood as a lot of people are, but I readily grant that they are effective in that story, even though the type of thing that they are doesn't have as much appeal for me. So the reason I don't see there to be much benefit of bringing back the Flood, and a lot of these things are going to keep recurring as I talk about these, is you have to look at what can be done and what do you gain versus what do you lose. And what I mean by that is whenever you bring something like this back, you demystify it a little bit. And I think a good go-to example is the Weeping Angels. Now, the subsequent appearances of the Weeping Angels were actually pretty solid, but let's be honest, they were never as scary again being brought back, because they couldn't be, because you only knew enough to get through that story. But when you bring a villain back in something like the Flood, you have to get more information, because if you don't, then really your only option is to completely retread what you did last time. And what is there to do then? Now, what's the point? All you've done is give diminishing returns, because you're just revisiting. You're adopting the slasher franchise model. Oh, we'll just do the same thing again. So that shouldn't be an option with any of these. But where is there really to go with the Flood? I mean, they have to stay on Mars, because if the whole concept is a single drop gets in water anywhere on Earth and then it affects the whole planet, well, you can't realistically prevent that. So they can't ever come to Earth. And you do have to kind of limit them to being on Mars. But I mean, what is there to do? Another colony gets on Mars. There's another breakout. We go through the whole thing again. Alternately, I'm sure some people would say, well, you could do a prequel because the Doctor says that the Ice Warriors froze this thing. And that's true, but then you've got a predetermined ending. So I'll say that maybe if they could find a twist on how to do that isn't just and at the end, they managed to freeze it, which is what we already know happens from the background. I mean, that's always the problem with prequels that are filling in something to a point we already know. Generally, when prequels work, it's when it's, we're dealing with a chunk of time where, oh, boy, anything could have happened there. What did? Let's watch. But when it's got a predetermined outcome, I don't see a lot of value in that. So I don't think the story possibilities that the Flood offers are enough to have them worth bringing back. Number 4, the Family of Blood. One of my absolute favorite one-time villains. They are astounding. Now, I'm gonna caveat this because I would say there is a possibility of bringing back the Family of Blood, but you can't do them as villains again because the Doctor trounced them so completely. And that was part of the whole thing with the punishment he gave them, is you realize half the reason he was running from them, it was a mercy, because if he stopped and faced them, he was going to do horrible things to them, and they didn't stand a chance, and that's what happened. So we already know that they can't actually take on the Doctor. We know that by the end of their story. So they don't work as a threat to try and bring them back as that. Maybe if you were to have some reason, it'd be really hard to come up with a reason that wasn't super contrived, that the Doctor would want or need the assistance of some or any of these people. The most obvious candidate would be the daughter. Daughter of mine, sister of mine, however you want to think of her as. Because it was actually implied in the ending narration there that maybe the Doctor would let her out someday. We've got a problem in that I would think she's probably not supposed to age, but obviously that actress would have severely aged out, so we'll have to recast. It was long enough ago that probably not the end of the world to do that. But again, I think it's very hard, especially with how much time has passed, to come up with a reason to bring them back that could possibly live up to the hype. That's part of the problem with some of these. If it's been a really long time since the last time we saw them, that creates an inherent buildup that makes it all the harder for these things to deliver on. And I think the Family of Blood suffers from that possibly more than any of the others that I've got on this list. Number 3, this one I see brought up a lot and I don't get it. The Vashta Nerada. I don't get why people want the Vashta Nerada back. Now, the Vashta Nerada are the shadows that eat people from the two-parter Silence of the Library, Forest of the Dead. And I love that story. It's so good. And the Vashta Nerada are great in it. But the first thing to realize is they're not really, I mean, they're functionally they are the villains of the story, and I do consider them as such. But they're not Doctor Who villains in the traditional sense. They're not invaders. They are incredibly dangerous, but as far as they're concerned, they're defending their own territory. So you can't have them, going out and becoming a problem somewhere else. The only reason it happened in the library and it doesn't happen anywhere else is that their force got ground and pulped and bound into these books, and then the spores released, and there they are. So you can't really do an invasion story because the number of situations in which that sort of scenario would happen again, it'd just be really contrived and repetitive. So then your only option is to have the Doctor happen to land somewhere where the Vashta Nerada already are, and then what can you do with them? I mean, from what we could tell, the Vashta Nerada were basically a hive mind. So if it's a hive mind only interested in feeding and protecting its own territory, what is there to do besides repeat what you already did? And what they already did was brilliant. The Two Shadows was brilliant. The going dark and all that stuff. The ghosts on the thing. That was great. All that was great, but if you do it again, you devalue it, and I don't know what else there is to be done with these. It's a bit like, frankly, it's like the Alien from the Aliens franchise. And yes, I know they made sequels, including a real good one. I'll make a comparison in a second. But, it's just this thing that if you encounter it, you're in a lot of trouble. So all you can do is encounter a heck of a lot more of it, except this doesn't scale up the way that Alien to Aliens did, because we already encountered a massive swarm of it. And if you do something like have a Vashta Nerada queen or what have you, everyone will just go, oh, you're ripping off Aliens, and it takes you out of it, and it's not as good. So I see this one brought up a lot, and as effective as the Vashta Nerada are, I don't see what the story possibilities are for them, other than just, oh, we landed in a place where they are. Boy, this is a pain in the butt. And I don't think you gain anything from that. And I think you lose some of the value that they had when you do that, because I think possibly more than any of the others, because there is no the collective intelligence that we understand of this thing is limited-ish, at least in terms of its desires and its goals. What can you do with that? Not much, I don't think. Number 2, the Beast. Now, Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit, love these things. Love it. I love most of these things that I'm talking about. And as far as a character who would have reason to be brought back and come into the story again and, cause a heck of a lot of trouble, what he wants, he could theoretically show up any number of places, cause all kinds of damage. The problem with this one is just the way that the story ended, which is an unsurvivable scenario. Both the body and both the physical form of the Beast and the body which his mind was possessing fell into a black hole. Even if you want to tell me that the Beast is such a creature that wouldn't kill him, he still can't really get out of that. And I will now cop to the fact that yes, a number of Doctor Who villains have escaped definitive deaths before. Primarily, I would say Davros and the Master are the big ones. But I would say we don't need another Doctor Who villain like that. We don't need another one where when we see them quote-unquote die, we go, yeah, right, when's he coming back? We don't. 2's enough. I'm under other circumstances, if the Master and Davros weren't such good characters, I would argue 2 is too many. I'm just not a fan of that kind of thing. If you're going to kill somebody and be like, oh no, we made it, please stick to it. And that's kind of what I want for the Beast. And the other thing is, I worry that if they were to ever bring the Beast back, whether it be the physical body or the mind or both, that they'd have to answer more questions about it, what it is and where it comes from. And I definitely don't want that. I think that story hit the perfect balance of ambiguity in terms of heavily implying what it is, but also giving the seeds of doubt. And the Doctor having to admit he does not know what he just fought. And I like that. I like the sort of existential drag it puts on the Doctor, that he not only did he... I mean, the Doctor gets excited when he lands somewhere and something's going on that he doesn't know. It's like, ooh, something new. But usually by the end of those situations, he understands what it was he landed in. I think the situations in which the Doctor comes away still not really knowing what it was that happened, whether he could help or not, those are few and far between, almost non-existent. And I kind of want to preserve the one major instance that I am aware of where that happened. And like I keep saying, bringing the Beast back is gonna dilute him, because a big part of what was epic about that story was also the location, the Impossible Planet. And I think moving the Beast to anywhere else, any location that's not as hazardous, that's not as unique, he'll lose impact, he'll lose vitality, and he won't be as good. And finally, number 1, the Midnight Entity. Midnight is a brilliant episode with a brilliantly realized, bizarre antagonist that I never, ever want to see again. I said with the Beast, I couldn't think of another one. Midnight's the other one. Midnight's the other one where the Doctor doesn't know what just happened. Doesn't know what it wanted. Doesn't know what its goal was. Doesn't know if it was malicious or just trying to survive. And he can't. He will never know. It was the one time that the Doctor's, especially the 10th Doctor's superpower of being able to talk his way out of, through, whatever situation he's in, was used against him. And I think that standing as a singular, shaking experience for him is important. In addition to the fact that, much like the Beast, you can't bring it back without at the very least explaining how it came back. And I don't see how you explain how it came back without explaining more of what it is. And I don't want to know. I don't ever want to know. I've seen some insane fan theories about what people think it is. And, if you have one, cool, fine. Have your headcanon. That's lovely. But, I don't have a theory what it is. I don't want to know. There's stuff out there that we cannot understand. And we might encounter it, interact with it, but we'll never understand it. And the Midnight Entity falls under that, and I love that. And again, also a bit like the Beast, a big part of, this was a villain that was designed to work in a very specific scenario. That you can't just repeat the scenario because then you're just repeating. And if you put that entity and that villain in any other scenario, can they possibly work as well? I doubt it. I don't think so, because it was very custom built for the story that it was in. And the mystery and the unknown of it is such a huge part of what makes it so good. I mean, we call it the Midnight Entity by default. We don't even have a name for this thing. That's perfect. No more information. I don't ever want to see it come back. I don't want to ever see something that gets hinted at will later become the Midnight Entity. Nada. Don't ever want to know. Because it was just this thing that was terrifying. Let it stay that. So that's my list of 5 fantastic Doctor Who villains of the modern era that I don't ever want to see again. So, what are your thoughts? What are some great one-time villains that you think need to remain as one-time villains? Or what are some villains that have become recurring that you think maybe should have only been left at one appearance? Whatever your thoughts are on anything related to what I just said, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do, such as like and subscribe and support me on Patreon. There's buttons and there's links. They take you places and they do things. Check them out. So remember, folks, you are the council. I just run the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned.